opportunity to raise your hand, and we'll call on you for your questions or for you to provide your feedback. I will try to ask everyone to limit your statements, perhaps to a minute or so, and your questions so that we can hear from as many people as possible today. So with that, I will hand it over to Mayor Wheeler to provide an overview of the budget modification investments.
Great, thanks, Mark. And I'm going to take about 10 minutes here just sort of to give some background context and set the stage for today's conversation. Well, thank you all for being here. I know you're all tremendously busy, so I appreciate your taking time, particularly on a Friday afternoon, to talk about this important subject. I'm, of course, Mayor Ted Wheeler. My office is doing about a dozen of these outreach and listening sessions. Every fall, the City Budget Office updates the city's revenues and expenditures, and city bureaus provide program and personnel updates. And this is the process that we call the fall budget monitoring process, or the BUMP. During this year's fall BUMP, the City Budget Office has concluded that there's about $62 million in additional resources. And this is largely as a result of higher collections of business taxes than anticipated from last year. Now I'm working with my colleagues on the Portland City Council to decide how best to allocate those resources. And so I want to spend some time today talking about that. I have focused my proposed investments on my top priorities, which are safety, livability, houselessness, and economic recovery. And those aren't just my priorities, those are also the City Council's agreed upon priorities. The investments we're talking about today, just narrowly the investments related to the fall BUMP, don't represent the totality of what we're doing. This fall process builds on the tens of millions of dollars that the city's already invested during last spring's budget process, as well as the fiscal year 21-22 adopted budget process. And there's been substantial federal resources allocated, as many of you know, both through CARES as well as ARPA, the American Rescue Plan. So what we're talking about today is just a subset of that. We are continuing the investments in developing proposals that reflect the focus areas that I mentioned, and that is the work of the fall BUMP. I want to start with a value that I know all of you hold as people who are concerned about houselessness, people who work with our houseless population, those of you who are service providers. We know that everyone wants people within our city to have a safe place to rest and a place to call home. Ultimately, the approaches we seek are compassionate. The rapid increase in unsheltered homelessness is, without any question, in my opinion, the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time. We learned recently from our impact reduction team that there are approximately 250 to 300 unsanctioned houseless camps across the Portland metro area. When I say unsanctioned, I mean they're not sponsored by any government, they are not sponsored by any entity. They are spontaneous camps. There's somewhere between 250 and 300 of them, and they range from very small encampments to very, very large encampments. On Monday of this week, I joined Commissioner Ryan and Multnomah County Chair Kafori to share our proposed partnership, which is going to combine the city and the county resources to address the houseless crisis. I'm really pleased by that. It enables us to take our $20 million contribution towards houselessness and basically leverage it into $40 million. It allows us to coordinate our efforts across the spectrum of services available to the houseless population. While we are tackling this at the local level, I also want to make it very clear that I understand, and many of you have spoken to me about this, houselessness does not know local or state boundaries. It is an issue that will require the state to be actively engaged in, and it will also require federal support to ultimately end houselessness. I've called on Congress to embrace houselessness as the national humanitarian disaster that it is. And I have said, and my colleagues around the country have said quite clearly, that we cannot solve houselessness without help from the federal government. And from my perspective, what I'm lobbying for specifically, while Congress is looking at this unprecedented human services budget, they need to take into account and help pay for zero to low income housing. Specifically, we've asked for additional vouchers, but we're open to any strategy that could help local jurisdictions across the country, including the city of Portland. But until that happens, this is our city, it's our responsibility. We need to use the resources we have available locally. And the city and the county have joined together to create this package of $38 million that collectively invests in the houseless initiatives. It includes many different aspects, but some of the main things that it does, it provides 400 new shelter beds, it expands outreach programs, and it puts more funding towards helping to clean up areas across the city. I'd like to take the majority of the remainder of my time to this afternoon, after I'm done speaking, to hear about you, to hear from you around some of these specific proposals. If there is time at the end, then we can talk about some of the other fall bump priorities, including community safety, economic prosperity, and the like. However, with only an hour, I sort of doubt we will get to those other areas. We did think it was important for us to spend time to go through the houseless package specifically with you. Before I do that, I want to say a couple of thanks to folks on the call today. Obviously, I want to thank our service providers in the community and our community leaders and volunteers who work with our houseless population on a day-to-day basis. I know what a difficult time this has been for you and for your peers and for your employees. The needs have been withering, demand for those services gone up, and resources have not necessarily followed along. And so I'm hopeful that this fall bump process will help give you some economic relief and allow you to be able to have more tools and resources at your disposal to do the good work that you do. I want to thank Commissioner Ryan and his team. Mark Bond is on this call, and he represents Commissioner Ryan. I want to thank you for your ongoing leadership around houselessness. It's really been great to have such a strong partner on the City Council working with us. I also want to publicly thank county government, the county commissioners, but especially Chair Kafori for reaching out to me and really being the one who had the idea of bringing us together and figuring out how resources could be leveraged together. Mark, I know you're a modest guy. As our moderator today, I want to thank you for not only agreeing to do that, but you're also the director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and you have been key in the development of this proposal, and I want to thank you. And there are many others I could thank, and I'm sure I'm leaving important people out. That's not my intent. But the main thing I want to get across here is this really is a community-wide effort. So, I'm going to go ahead and just walk through the main points of the proposed houselessness package. As Mark said, please hold your questions until the end. Then Mark and I will facilitate the Q&A session. You can feel free to use the comment section if you'd like. So number one, investment in direct engagement with houseless folks in unsanctioned camps that we would describe as high need. There's about $1.4 million for outreach program at what are described as high need unsanctioned encampments. That's split 50-50 with the county. As many of you know, there's an unprecedented number of these encampments in high need areas. The main part of this proposal is that it'll hire 20 more outreach workers. These are navigators who go to the encampments and connect with houseless individuals where they are, build up a rapport, build up trust, and then connect them to value services and resources that they may need. For some, it may be domestic violence survivorship services. For others, it might be connections to to substance abuse treatment. For others still, it might be youth services. The goal here is to meet people where they are and tailor their needs to them as specifically as possible and get them whatever help they need to get off and stay off the streets. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add on this particular item?
No, Mayor, I think that's good. And if there are more questions, we can get into the details later.
Okay, great. I know you are a co-author of that, so I didn't want to go on without your perspective if necessary. Second of all, there is increased funding for vector control. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, vector control is just a fancy way of getting rid of the potential spread of disease through rodents and other types of animals. This is fully funded by Multnomah County. Vector control protects health and it enhances livability through both monitoring of rat and mosquito populations, and environmental improvements are made to reduce those populations. They respond to residential complaints, they perform rat inspections, they provide education, they supply traps, and they provide eradication where it's necessary to protect those who are living on the streets as well as adjacent community members. This will provide additional funding for this vector control work. Third, there is expansion of capacity for the impact reduction program. There's about $6.5 million to expand the city's homeless and urban camping impact reduction program. This is $6.5 million coming specifically from the city. This will double IRP's campsite removal capacity for a one-year period. These funds will enable IRP, the impact reduction program, to return to pre-pandemic operation levels with an increase in staffing for hazmat remediation, as well as the creation of low barrier trash programs. We've heard from many of you that an immediate improvement that could be of great benefit to people who are unhoused on our streets, as well as to people living in the adjacent communities, would be improved litter collection through the camps and cleanup of litter through the camps. And we intend to expand that opportunity through this funding. Related to that are sites that have been abandoned and are in potentially dangerous terrain. There's about $500,000 to pay contractors to pick up trash or debris left in locations with dangerous terrain, for example, like on the side of a freeway. This is $500,000 that will be coming from the city side of the equation. In locations with dangerous terrain, so like, as I said, the side of a freeway or steep embankments or near railroad tracks, hazardous sites, oftentimes what we're seeing and what we've heard is that former campsite trash isn't being picked up in a timely manner, and our intention here is to improve that. Our proposal seeks to hire specialty contractors who are trained to work in these specific terrains, who are also pre-approved to remove trash from various properties, regardless of jurisdiction. So that would include the city properties, metro properties, county properties, ODOT properties, as well as others. In other words, we're overcoming some of the bureaucracy that has traditionally stood in the way of litter being collected. This will allow for litter to be cleaned up at a faster pace and with a lot less red tape. Fifth, we have heard the demand for additional storage and hygiene solutions. And so we've provided funding for about 250 to 300 unsanctioned camps that are currently in need. You will notice that number comports with what we think the total number of unsanctioned camps are. There's nearly $5 million in the package to expand storage as well as portable hygiene services for those camps, 250 to 300 unsanctioned camps. We're splitting that cost with the county. We're taking up about 3.85 million. The county's putting in about $1 million towards that. This will also allow us to conduct a rapid assessment to identify the immediate hygiene and storage needs of our unhoused neighbors. And we've heard significant concerns about the need for storage, and as well as longer term strategies to address those needs, including looking at improved mobile hygiene sites, site-based hygiene pods, urban rest stops, day centers, as well as short and long-term property storage opportunities. And I know that we're working with some of you on this call to help think of those innovative strategies and solutions that could be put into place. And I want to thank those of you who are involved in this for your direct feedback. Once identified, the expectation is this will include both shorter as well as longer term hygiene and storage strategies. It could include absorbing rental costs or program staffing costs, capital costs for hygiene and storage equipment, site acquisition, as well as potentially development costs associated with the creation of hygiene and storage services. And again, this has been shaped in large measure based on feedback we have received from the community, from service providers, from houseless individuals themselves, and we hope that you will see this addresses those needs. Commissioner Ryan and his team have been very engaged in this, and so Mark, if there's anything you would like to add, Mark Bond, I'd certainly encourage you to pipe up at this particular juncture.
No, thank you so much, Mayor Wheeler. No, like Mark Jolan said earlier, I think that it's a solid overview, and if folks have follow-up questions, I'm happy to cover them towards the Q&A component of the hour.
Cool, thanks, Mark, and we really appreciate you being on this call. Sixth, we are going to create a street services coordination center and establish alignment with the Joint Office of Homeless Services. So this is one of the most boring sounding things in the entire package. And frankly, it's one of the things I am the most excited about. If we hear anything from our service providers and community activists who work in the community, I got an earful last night for a number of people who on their own go out and they volunteer and they help houseless neighbors in their neighborhoods. If I heard anything, it's that they feel that there isn't good coordination or alignment or data management around the homeless population, their needs, and what resources are available. So we are going to create a street services coordination center that will align community needs with the Joint Office of Homeless Services. It will coordinate the many different types of homeless services across the county. This center will, I believe, improve not only city-county collaboration in a way that's never been done before, but I think it'll also connect us to our service providers better. And let me give one concrete example. It will, for example, allow us to monitor in real time how many shelter beds are available, where they are available, so that outreach workers, first responders, and others will be able to offer up shelter beds to somebody who's unhoused, knowing with confidence that a bed is actually available in a specific location at a specific time. And as time goes on, we can build the information that's created by this coordination center, and I believe better and more quickly connect individuals in need with the resources that are actually available in the community that many of you as service providers are providing. So thank you all for your efforts on that. Mark, again, feel free to jump in if there's anything you'd like to add on that front either. Number 7, service provider hiring and retention incentives. So there's $2 million in this package to hire and create retention incentives for new staff. 500,000 is coming from the city, 1.5 million is coming from the county. Our shelters, our outreach teams, our behavioral support partners, and our many houseless service organizations are experiencing incredible workforce shortages and morale issues. And at a time when it is very, very challenging to hire people who will do this hard work, we want our service providers to be able to attract and retain the most qualified employees for the critical work that's being done to address this humanitarian crisis. Therefore, an investment in the wages and incentives of frontline workers and continued efforts to expand the pipeline of prospective employees in our community based on providing houseless services is super critical. This will fund bonuses to support staff recruitment, retention bonuses. It will also include a mid-year 3% increase to provider operating budgets. Mark, is there more on that I should say that I have not?
Oh, Mayor, I think you've summarized it. Thank you.
Okay, good. And if I say anything that's wrong, please feel free to correct me. I believe this information to be all accurate, but if there's something that isn't, I have no objection at all to people correcting me. Number 8, enhanced mental and behavioral health supports. This one is really important. This is $2.5 million to enhance mental and behavioral health support programs. I think all of us recognize there just aren't enough social and behavioral health supports to meet the needs of our houseless population. And as the city prepares to expand the Portland street response to function citywide, which is also part of this fall budget process, we have to recognize that we still may face a major disparity between the need and available services. This package supports the expansion of behavioral health in-reach teams in Old Town, focused on providing community presence to prevent the escalation of behaviors, to connect individuals with ongoing support, and offer de-escalation as needed. This package also adds 2 teams of wraparound support specialists to support people with serious behavioral health challenges in a new motel shelter capacity. Mark, anything else on that one? No, okay, good. Number 9, and if people have follow-up questions, obviously we've got lots of experts on the call. Number 9, expand the behavioral health unit. This is $650,000 to expand the Portland Police Bureau's behavioral health unit. This proposal will increase the city's capacity to aid those in acute behavioral crises resulting from known or suspected mental illness and or drug and alcohol addiction by increasing funds to the city's behavioral health unit. This request includes funding to double the number of treatment beds available so that more individuals can begin on their path to recovery. These dollars would be programmable immediately. Sam Adams, I believe you are on the call. Is there anything else you wanted to add on this particular item? Number 10, create shelter. I must be doing a good job. Nobody's adding anything, which is a rare day for me, so I'll enjoy it while it lasts. Number 10, creating a shelter permit fee waiver reimbursement fund. So this is $1 million put in by the city of Portland. As many of you on this call know, permit fees costs can be extremely prohibitive and a significant obstacle in shelter siting and construction. There are currently 6 bureaus that are all responsible for shelter permits. BDS will establish a permit fee waiver reimbursement fund, which will serve as a clearinghouse for other bureaus when shelter permit fees are waived. And I assure you, Commissioner Ryan and Mark Bond, who's on the call here, they're working feverishly to rationalize our permitting system in the city of Portland. We recognize that for people who are seeking permits, whether it's for a shelter or for a house or anything, there's just a lot of different bureaucratic hurdles people need to jump through, and we are working to make the city's efforts around permitting more functional and more friendly to those who seek permits. But this particular investment is specific to waiving fees for those of you who are creating shelters. Number 11, increasing the number of shelter beds available citywide. This is our single largest investment in the entire fall bump process. This is $18 million to increase the number of shelter beds citywide. As the number of unsheltered houseless individuals in the Portland region continues to grow, we need to invest in a range of additional shelter programs, both for the short term as well as the long term. This package allows for the lease and purchase of additional motel shelter capacity, congregate shelter capacity, and a multi-use site that can offer alternative outdoor or safe rest village style shelter, as well as congregate shelter and a range of storage and other services to people who are currently unsheltered. In total, the investments contemplated here would add 400 beds, rooms, pods of high quality long-term capacity to our shelter system. Through the Joint Office of Homeless Services, the city and the county are targeting 3 specific locations right now to acquire and repurpose to be used as indoor congregate and motel shelter, as well as alternative shelter space. Funds will provide for the purchase, for the master leasing, and the operating costs for the remainder of the fiscal year. So unless Mark has anything else to add on that, I'd like to open it up and see if there are questions or feedbacks about any of these proposals. And I'll leave it to your able facilitation skills, Mark, to walk us through this. And then when we get to the end, I'll tell you a little bit about next steps and how you can all get involved.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Again, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I've been monitoring. I haven't seen questions. I've seen some comments, and we can certainly go to those. But if you provided a comment and you'd like to share it live here, please do that. If you'd like me to call on you, raise your hand. All right, and forgive me, I'm going to do the best I can with names. Amira. And you'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and hi, Mayor Wheeler. I wanted to give time to anyone that wanted to ask questions about your proposal. So if that does happen, please feel free to raise your hand and I will yield my time for that. But I also wanted to address public safety in this meeting. I know we didn't get to it last night, and I'm sure that's something that many people are concerned about as well. So, Mayor, we had a conversation in another Zoom call about a month and a half ago for a proposal to bring advanced peace to Portland. And it's a proposal that I've worked on to explain why Portland is a good fit for our community. And it directly addresses the people that are involved in active shootings and often become victims of this violence. So I have to change my screen to look at one person. I'm way too nervous to do this. Oh, just a moment. Okay. So, we know from our Office of Violence Prevention that the majority of people that are involved in violent crime are people that are aged generally 25 to 34 with an average age of 31 years old. And yet at this time, we don't have programs that directly support these people in a restorative way. We've found that we have a lot of wonderful programs. I'm sorry, it has been a wild with the proposal going public that people have been texting. And I don't know how to mute that. But we have found that since the average age of shooters are 31 years old, those people are not being worked with in our community. We have a lot of programs for youth. I've listed them out in the proposal, but we don't have programs directly working with these people. And I've been contacting every nonprofit to ask, what are we doing? I've contacted all of our offices through Portland to find out what are we doing for this group of people, and we just aren't addressing it. And so if we have money that we can use towards a program that can directly work with the people that are involved in these active shootings and violence and people that are victims of it, it would be a really great investment for us to consider this as an option for this spending. And the amount for advanced peace is very small. It's a $250,000 commitment a year. And for a 4-year commitment, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket for the amount of surplus that we have. So if you are interested, Mary, you mentioned you would read the proposal. I've been connecting with Sam Diaz, and he is no longer with you. And so I don't know if the proposal has actually made its way to you, but I did send it over a couple different times, and I would love you to review it to see if this is something that we could bring to Portland.
Yeah, good. So the answer is yes. I've seen the proposal. There is an RFP on it. I would very much like to have my team follow up with you on this. As you know, in the spring, the council allocated about $4-point-something-ish million towards community organizations that work directly with people impacted by gun violence with the hope of intervening and preventing and providing everything from education, job training, family health and community support. This sounds very much in alignment with that ideal. So I would like to have my team follow up with you. Sarah, can we make sure that happens, please?
Yes, Elmira, there's an RFP now. I'll send you a link that you can apply for. Good timing, by the way.
Bobby, can you identify who you are? People don't necessarily know who you are.
I apologize. I'm Bobby Lee. I'm the mayor's chief of staff. I'll follow up with you with the link on the RFP. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, Mayor. I think it's important to just note that we have a lot of programming and organizations that are dedicated to helping our youth, but currently we don't have programs that are structured to help this age group of individuals that are involved, and that's the key piece that I think is missing in all of our current programming.
Yeah, Amira, you're pointing out something that I think has been shocking for a lot of people as we get better data on the gun violence situation here as well as in other cities. What's interesting is while there are some young people involved, it is largely, as you said, men, mostly Black, but not exclusively, in their 30s. And that is a shift from what we've seen in previous waves of gun violence. And I agree with you, it requires a different approach. So I do look forward to my team following up with you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. I
appreciate it. All right, so we've got a good number of hands up, but there are a couple of questions in the chat here, Mayor. One of them from Sean Sullins. Do we know who will be in charge of the new coordination center? Sean's neighborhood association would like to learn more about the center. Do you want to take that, or shall I?
No, I'd actually like to throw that one back to you and Sam Adams, if I could.
So I'm not seeing Sam, but I'll start it. The center would be hosted at the city of Portland, and the joint office would be a partner there. It's contemplated to have managerial representatives from multiple bureaus, including Parks and Office of Management Finance and Portland Street Response and others whose work directly touches people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in our public spaces. And so the center would live at the city and be managed by the city. But as the mayor said, a significant focus of that is to ensure that there is good coordination between those public space management entities and our homeless response system. And so that's where the joint office has a significant role to play in ensuring that coordination is happening, and then working with our resources, shelter and outreach resources, in a coordinated way to ensure that we're bringing services to the folks who are being sort of engaged by those different public space management entities.
Thank you, Mark. And if I could also just answer a question that just popped up in the chat, because I think it's a really important one, which is, are we listening to houseless individuals as we craft these proposals? And I want to be clear, the answer is unequivocally yes. A lot of the ideas that are being funded through this proposal, you will obviously recognize as coming from service providers and those who work professionally in this space. But issues like storage, issues like the hygiene stations, a desire for better coordination on the government, government nonprofit side of the equation, so that houseless individuals don't have to run around and try to triage different services from different providers. Those come directly from the houseless population as things they say would be helpful in helping them with the needs they have and in order to be able to get off and stay off the streets.
All right. I don't, Sam, are you on this call, and is there more you want to say?
I am on this call, and I think that covers it.
All right, thank you. So I think I next saw Mercedes hand go up. So Mercedes.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I wanted to ask two questions. One was thinking about the direct engagement and enhanced mental health. Like, those are both really great investments here. Thank you for that. And I'm wondering if there would be any interest in including some set aside funds specifically to support folks in signing up for Social Security and Social Security disability. It's a very small investment that the city and the county currently make, but it has huge returns on getting long-term funds into folks' hands that they can use for housing or other essential needs. So that was my first question, if there would be some openness to that. And I will point out, we do have Cass on the phone, who is the director of our BEST program, that could speak volumes about the kind of return that comes with that type of investment.
So I'll take a stab, and maybe somebody else will want to chime in. I am a huge proponent of connecting people with services they are already entitled to receive. And there is nothing more frustrating from my perspective than when we find somebody who is houseless in the community, who is living in substandard conditions, and then we find out that they are an elderly individual, or they are a veteran, or they're in some other way entitled to housing support that they don't know they have the ability to access. And so I don't know if there's anything in this specific fall bump package that supports that or not, but I would be very interested in taking that up as an issue, if not in the fall bump and in the regular budget process this spring. Mark, do you have a sense through the joint office of what we fund along those lines? Because obviously leveraging people into other resources that they already are entitled to, that's the best bang for the buck we could possibly invest in. I can't think of a better strategy.
Yes, Mayor. So the joint office does provide funding, both city and county funding, to the BEST program and to this kind of a service. And I think we've heard, and there's a lot of interest. It sounds like on both the county commission side and the city council side to look at whether it's time to increase some of those investments. It's not in this package currently, but as you said, we'll also be coming into a budget process for the next fiscal year, and I expect this is something we'll be talking about.
Thank you very much. If there is any opportunity to talk about it sooner, let us know. We'll be happy to help you understand what those level of investments could possibly be. And then my other question was, I know that half of the funds that come out of the kind of the excess revenue is typically set aside for a city capital set aside. And I'm wondering if any of those funds are available for the city to actually purchase property, whether that's property that already has housing on it that could then be deployed, or vacant property, because I know there's been a demand for property for the Safe Rest villages, additional shelters, and additional housing, and if any of those funds could be programmed in that way.
So you are correct that traditionally half of any excess revenues go towards capital. We currently have something like $4-ish billion in deferred capital maintenance backlogs at the city level. And as I looked at crafting this fall bump proposal, and I looked at the withering emergency needs that exist today in our community around houselessness, around safety, around livability, around jumpstarting our economic recovery, I made the judgment that the $30 million that would go towards capital investments would be better spent today at the street level, addressing the crises that are before us right now. So I made that judgment call. My colleagues are supportive of that as far as I can tell. But you will be happy to know that some of those resources are in fact going towards capital purchases. Specifically, the $18 million that I mentioned previously will be used to actually purchase facilities, whether it's motels or other facilities that will then permanently be in our emergency shelter and our congregate shelter inventory. I should also point out that had we put half into the capital set aside, we would not be able to use it to purchase any new assets. You can only, if you put it into the capital set aside, use it for existing maintenance of, or into maintenance of existing infrastructure that you already own. So I made that call along with my team, and it seems like the City Council supports that decision.
All right, I'm going to go back to the chat where we have a question, looks like from David Dixon, asking whether there will be an effort to track the numbers of unsheltered residents and establish measurable goals to reduce those numbers over time. Mark Bond, maybe you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. David, thanks for the question. Yeah, we, the Joint Office and Commissioner Ryan, our office, we're really highly prioritize the utilization of data to be able to kind of track our progress. The Joint Office is currently in process of working on putting together a public-facing dashboard that provides high-level data sets on the houselessness crisis and just kind of the work that's being done within the Joint Office and throughout our continuum of care, so that the public more generally knows from a high level the type of work that we're doing, and then can also dive in deeper through like hyperlinks that kind of link to all those kind of high level data points, so folks can really go deep on whatever important data sets exist. And just yesterday, actually, Commissioner Ryan and I met with Joint Office staff as well as folks from a group called Community Solutions. Community Solutions is a national organization that's funded largely through Kaiser. They have an initiative called Built for Zero. It's a collaborative with cities throughout the country. And their whole goal is to do essentially exactly what you're describing in your question, David. Their goal is to work with continuums of care across the country to put together essentially like a file for each houseless individual, so that we do know them by name. We're able to see where they're at specifically at any point in the continuum, with whether they're accessing services at, whether it's a food kitchen, whether it's temporary shelter, whether it's indoor congregate shelter, whether it's 211 access, just like literally any kind of interventions and interactions they have within the larger continuum of care, just really knowing them by name and building more personalized relationships and utilizing our data that we collect to help in that mission. And the Joint Office, the Executive Committee of Home for Everyone, rather, voted to kind of formalize that partnership with the Joint Office of Homeless Services several months ago now. And we've been working with Built for Zero to kind of build that partnership so that we can both, again, build out this public-facing dashboard, but then also do the kind of important behind-the-scenes work with the providers and just with the Joint Office's framework to be able to utilize data in the way that you're kind of describing.
Thank you, Mark. Again, I don't know who was first, but Lori Slaughter, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, and to everybody who put into time and energy into these proposals. And I'm from outside in, and my main question is, as we deploy these funds through programs and RFPs and hiring new people, how will we as a city ensure that the people that need our help are being treated with dignity and respect throughout all of this work? Because I think you mentioned it early in the presentation, Mayor Wheeler, that this is a humanitarian crisis like no other. And I think that is a value that most service providers hold, that everyone that crosses us gets treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve. So I'm not sure what has been done in this process of creating the proposal to ensure that as we deploy all of this work and this money, that is held at the top of mind for everyone involved?
That is a great question. And you can see, I hope, the humanitarian aspects of this proposal focused on basic human needs, hygiene, storage, paying our outreach workers a living wage. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that we're employing outreach workers who in some cases are homeless themselves because we're not paying them a living wage. I mean, that's counterproductive on its face. So I hope you see humanity reflected in the types of things that we have chosen to support. There's another aspect to this as well. I meet with many, many different types of constituencies over the course of a day, over the course of a week. And what I hear, not only here in Portland, but I hear from my mayoral colleagues around the country, is that compassion is waning. And I don't know if that's sort of part of our national march towards less civility, or if it's something more specific. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And I have chosen to make investments that I think will also reduce some of the anger and frustration that the larger housed population feels by doing things like helping our houseless neighbors keep their campsites cleaner by providing litter collection and other services, providing the hygiene stations. I hear from a lot of houseless people that one of the reasons they have a lot of belongings is they have nowhere to put them. So they bring what they have with them when they go. And so the storage facilities, I think, are a good response in that case. So we're trying to meet the houseless population where they are with the compassionate needs, the compassionate services to fulfill their needs. And we're trying to also address the greater frustration of the community around the growth of the houseless population. I don't think there's a perfect strategy here, but I think the bottom line is approach this as a humanitarian crisis, as you said, act with a sense of urgency, understand that houselessness impacts those who are living on the streets the most, but that it also has residual impacts on others in the community, and encourage our community to continue to work together to address what really is a failure of upstream safety nets. I don't know if you've all read the New Meth article in the Atlantic magazine. It's long, but it's a must read. I really encourage you to read it. And it talks about the role of some of these new drugs, particularly this meth, on the streets and the havoc it is creating in terms of increasing the number of people experiencing and the severity of mental health affliction on our streets here in Portland, as well as all across the United States. And we need to reverse these trends. And while $62 million isn't going to do it, I hope you at least see that the investments we've chosen to make here are reflective of a humanitarian approach, but an urgent approach to get as many people off the streets as quickly and humanely as possible.
And Mayor, the only thing I would add here, Lori, we expect the outreach services, hygiene services, these services to be provided by community-based organizations that are mission-driven, that work with people experiencing homelessness every day and bring that trauma-informed perspective and that emphasis on human dignity and how we do the work as much as what we do. So, I think we're going to be in the joint office looking to our community-based organizations who want to participate in this work to bring their expertise. And then we have those expectations, right? Whether it's in how shelter is operated or how outreach is done, we have best practices that we expect the providers that we contract with to deliver. So that in combination with the nature of the investments, the what we're doing, the how will be something that the joint office is very focused in our discussions with our provider partners. Andy Miller, I think you're next.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Appreciate this opportunity. I'll try to be quick. 2 quick comments and a question. First, I just want to start by appreciating the investment in recruitment and retention. That's a very real issue on the ground with our nonprofits. I would like to see the frame of that shift from just recruiting at a challenging time and toward a frame that is a desire to pay a living wage to all of the folks doing human services work. And that's going to take a sustained effort more than these one-time resources. So, but I do appreciate the inclusion of that. Not sure I heard or saw where we're talking about racial equity with these investments, and I want to make sure we're continuing to lead with race as we do this work. And my question is, I'm wanting to better understand as I look at these investments where our commitment to housing first is. It seems like housing investments would be a good match for these one-time resources like the bump and our ARPA dollars. We know from listening to the Housing Bureau that it is not having the rosiest long-term resource projections at a time when we need to build out our affordable housing availability. And I know there are capital investments in this bundle, but they're all focused on shelter, and wondering if there was consideration given or could be given that some of those may actually be formulated not as short-term shelter that we have to pay ongoing operating of, but more toward a housing first model that would provide direct entry for folks from the streets.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Number one, for your patience. I know you had your hand raised for quite a while. Second of all, thank you for the work you do in the community. And third of all, thank you for the questions. So with the limited resources that were available, capital acquisition for housing was not foremost. We have other sources of revenue that we use, namely, as you well know, the Metro Housing Bond, as well as the Portland Affordable Housing Bond, which was passed by the voters here back in 2016. Those are our primary sources of funding for affordable housing. On the supply side, Commissioner Ryan and his team are working with the Bureau of Development Services and other city bureaus to reduce the cost and the hassle factor associated with the creation of zero to low income housing. I think I've also been pretty transparent that over the last several decades, there's been a wholesale transfer of responsibility of low-cost housing from the federal government to local government, and that transfer has been wholly ineffective. It has not worked. It has been a failure in the United States. And so we're going to continue to advocate for federal support for things like vouchers, if not the construction of low-income to zero-income housing and affordable housing. The quick answer to you is no, it is not foremost in this particular package because the package itself is just too small to really make a dent on the housing construction side, whereas on the service provision side, we think we really can make a measurable impact quickly. And so that was a judgment call.
Okay, thank you. I may be pressing this further as we look at the package in more detail, but I think we want to see our work lead with housing.
And Andy, I will say that I know we're running out of time, but as we look to acquire properties that we can use for shelter, we're also looking at the redevelopment potential of those properties into housing over time. So there's an opportunity to address some of the immediate shelter need and also be looking forward towards a day when we can redevelop those properties as housing options. So Sarah, your hand's up. I'm going to ask you to do this quick because then I think the mayor has some next steps wrap up and we do want to close it too.
Thanks. Super quick, just an observation. I'm Sarah Fisher. I'm the rector of Saints Peter and Paul Episcopal Church, and I'm also affiliated with Rahab Sisters, which we host. And I also read that Atlantic article and found it overwhelming and depressing and galvanizing. And my comment is just that I was surprised at the proportionately small amount of funds allocated to Portland Police Bureau Behavioral Health. I think it was one of the few six-figure allocations amid a whole lot of seven-figure allocations. And it's an area where I know that the wider community is really in great need for additional support for behavioral health.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I am a strong supporter of not only the behavioral health unit, but also the service coordination team that works with individuals who have addiction issues. The primary component cost-wise for the behavioral health unit from the city's perspective is actually the police component of that. And so we don't necessarily hire people specifically into the behavioral health unit. We hire them as police officers first, and then they apply to get into the behavioral health unit. That is a specialty unit. It requires certain types of individuals, training experience, and personalities, frankly, to be able to be successful in that unit. So we are front loading that unit through the hiring generally of police officers. And this proposal includes immediate support for more police officers through what's called a rehire program. That's in the fall bump. And I've also stated a goal to significantly increase both the number of certified police officers as well as a significant number of unarmed PS3s, public safety support specialists. In fact, my 3-year goal for 300 more personnel, a third of those will be unarmed PS3s. I want to assure you, Sarah, that I and my colleagues on the City Council strongly support the behavioral health unit. The dollars we've included are for the support of that unit. We also understand that as we staff up that unit, it's not just police officers, it's also, as you well know, community specialists around mental health, and we have to be cognizant of their capacity needs as well. But I do appreciate your feedback on that point, and I appreciate your support for it.
All right, Mayor, would you like to speak to next steps and wrap us up?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'd like to just sort of give you the next steps in this fall budget process. So on November 10th, the council will be having the first reading. We had our work session yesterday, so everybody now has access online to what's in the fall bump proposal. We will be deliberating it, asking questions, and taking testimony on November 10th. There will be a second reading if there are amendments, which I would absolutely expect there to be. So we do our final reading on November 17th, a week later. If you'd like to show support for any of these priorities, I would ask you to submit either oral or written testimony. You can provide oral testimony on November 10th by signing up at the council agenda website between November 5th and 9 a.m. on November 9th. You can go to the council agenda website and you'll see where you can sign up. And if you'd like to provide written testimony, the council does read written testimony. The email address is cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The letter C testimony at portlandoregon.gov. And you can provide testimony anytime you want to before November 10th so that the council will have the time to read that testimony and use it to inform their decisions. So I also want to thank you all again for being here this afternoon. I want to thank you for the work you do in the community. I want to thank you for your passion to address this crisis. And I want to thank you for the partnership that we have. I feel very privileged when I have meetings like this to be the mayor of this city. This, to me, is the kind of collaboration and work that makes this a uniquely awesome place to live.